Soon, my pretties. Soon, soon, soon. Bam! Iron Hands. All right, so I know that a lot has been said about this codex, but it is, or I guess Codex Supplement, because it's important to point out for any of you here that are new to this whole thing and haven't actually seen how these work, you do need the full Codex Space Marines Codex to work with this. This will just give you the additional rules if you decide to run Iron Hands or one of their successor chapters. But it's kind of interesting to see how this all works and how it builds on the rules that they have already within the main codex for the Space Marines. So, opening it up, it's a really beautiful book. I really like how they've been doing this with the artwork that they've been doing on the covers of these. It's super original. I really like the portrait feel to give them a sense of who they are. I think they've done a really good job with those. But going through, super beautiful book with some awesome fluff about the different companies and how they're developed and everything that goes along with them. They've got some beautiful artwork throughout, and then they've got some beautifully painted armies. It's kind of cool to see some of the new Primaris stuff as well as some of the older stuff like Sternguard veterans getting some love visually within the codex here, and talking about some of the successor chapters that they have going along and how to build it all up. So again, like I said, all of the rules, all of the models, and all of the units that you have available to you are in the Codex, the Space Marines Codex. So it's in the main Codex that you have all the point values for all of your models and weapons and stuff like that. So you need that to keep going through with these. But for running Iron Hands instead of just running any other Space Marine chapter, you get some additions. One of those additions is a brand new character, another one of the people to go across the Primaris here. We have the Iron Father, Fieros. Comes in at 110 points and does some incredible things. He can give a one friendly Iron Hands unit that is within 3 inches of him the ability to have a ballistic skill of 2+. He can repair vehicles 3 instead of just the D3 that you get from repairing. He does have the Blessings of the Omnissiah, but I think that's more to keep the keyword going with it. Master of the Forge allows his Blessing of the Omnissiah to give it 3 as opposed to D3, which is what every other Tech Marine has the ability to heal there. You also have Artificer Bionics, so he can... on a 5+, he's not losing it, so basically he has Disgustingly Resilient instead of the base trait that all Iron Hands have from their chapter tactics, which is in the main codex, the main Space Marines Codex, which is on a 6+ they have a Feel No Pain. Now he specifically has a 5+. And friendly Iron Hands units have a 5+ invul save, while their unit is within 6 inches of this model. So he gives out his buff, sort of like Azrael gives out, except his is a 5+. But I mean, with everything else that he's doing there for 110 points, that is a super sweet ability. Also, it's a super cool looking model. I mean, take a look at that thing. Super awesome with his axe and everything like that. The Gorgon's Wrath, which is, I think, the bolter thing up there. It's heavy 3. It's basically a heavy bolter, but it's AP -2 and 2 damage instead of 1 and 1. And then Harrow Hand, which is the axe, is strength +3, AP -2, 2 damage, which is pretty awesome. So going through again, they've got some really beautiful stuff, and then we start to get into the teeth of what this book is bringing to the table. So everybody, a lot of discussions already been had about the doctrines and how all of those work. It still is the same thing here. This doesn't change how that works. So if you bring an assassin, you no longer have the doctrines, the ability to use the doctrines. But if you're running a purely Iron Hands army and everyone has that ability there, you now have an addition to the regular doctrines, which give you basically an additional AP on certain weapons. So Devastator, you have heavy and grenades, you have into tactical, which gives you rapid fire, and assault weapons have an additional AP, and then it goes into assault doctrine, which is pistols and close combat weapons. But if you are Iron Hands, in addition to all of those, in addition to that, whilst you're in the Devastator Doctrine, all units that are Iron Hands do not suffer the penalty for moving and firing heavy weapons. So if you're a tank with a heavy weapon, or if you're just like a dude bro carrying a las cannon, if you move, you can shoot it without having the -1 penalty for moving with a heavy weapon. In addition, while this is active, when resolving an attack with a heavy weapon by a model with this ability, reroll a hit roll of 1. So you get to reroll 1s if you're rolling if it's Devastator Doctrine, which is pretty sweet. I mean, most of the time, especially with these guys, you're probably not looking at moving outside of Devastator Doctrine. Honestly, I think these guys are going to become the new basis for gunline armies with a lot of heavy weapons, a lot of abilities to buff each other, and just basically sit tight and just start shooting things off the board, because everything that they've got that they can buff each other with is pretty strong. And rerolling 1s automatically, so you don't even need a captain near you to do it. You can spend it on other tech marines to spread out the wealth or anything like that. I think it'd be pretty interesting to see how that all works out. But I think a lot of these guys, you're going to be seeing them sticking in Devastator Doctrine a lot longer than some of the other chapters. But it's pretty cool. So then you've got some Warlord Traits here, which are in addition to. You can still take the Warlord Traits that you have in the original, in the Codex Space Marines, but this is in addition. So if an Iron Hands character model is your Warlord, you can determine the Warlord trait they have here using this one. So it says specifically Iron Hands character, and so again here, Warlord Traits. If your Warlord is a character model from an Iron Hands successor chapter, you can use the Iron Hands Warlord Traits table opposite to determine what Warlord trait they have. Replace the Iron Hands keyword in all instances with their one. So there. And then with the chapter relics, Iron Hands successor chapters have access to special issue wargear relics, and relics of Medusa cannot be given to character models in successor chapters. So we'll get into that in a bit. It's kind of an interesting take on it. I think it's kind of cool the way they have it broken down there. So going into the Warlord traits here for the Iron Hands, you have the first one is Adept of the Omnissiah. At the end of the movement phase, this Warlord can repair one friendly Iron Hand vehicle model within 1 inch of them. That model regains 1 lost wound. So this is in addition. If you take this and your Warlord isn't a tech marine, you can still have him repair units, repair vehicles with but he can only do 1 if it's not a tech marine. If the Warlord is a tech marine, each time they do it, they do the D3 plus 1, which is kind of interesting. So which is really cool. The Iron Father, where he just does the straight 3, he has a specific Warlord trait that he has to take, which is Student of History, which we'll get to in a second. So he can't take that in addition, which is kind of interesting. We then have Will of Iron. This Warlord can attempt to resist 1 psychic power in your opponent's psychic phase in the same manner as a Psyker by taking a Deny the Witch test. If this Warlord is within 24 inches of the enemy model manifesting psychic power. So basically it gives them a Deny the Witch if you want to have it. So if you don't want to run a Psyker, but you still want to have some defense against Psykers, you can give them that Warlord trait, and suddenly now you have 1 Deny the Witch, which is pretty good. And in addition, if this Warlord is a Librarian, they can instead attempt to deny 1 additional psychic power. So plus 1 to the number of Deny the Witch tests they can take, which is pretty cool. So it's kind of interesting with those two, where they're basically giving the abilities a watered down ability from those specific types of HQs to everyone. But if you take those Warlord traits with those specific ones, like Tech Marine or a Librarian, you now get the added benefit of a plus 1 to what your power used to be. We then have All Flesh's Weakness. When your Warlord would lose his wound, roll a d6, and a 5+, the wound is not lost. So again, bumping up the Feel No Pain from a 6+ to a 5+, which is pretty good. Basically giving them Disgustingly Resilient, which, as all the times that I've faced off against a bunch of the Death Guard, let me tell you, it comes in super handy for them. Then we have Student of History, which is what the new character has. When this Warlord consolidates, they can move up to 6 inches instead of 3 inches, and do not have to end their move closer to the nearest enemy model, which is really interesting, because what this would allow you to do is to charge into the unit. You then attack first because you charged, fight them, and then during your consolidation, you can fall back 6 inches, and as opposed to having to go towards the closest enemy model, you could fall back 6 inches, and suddenly that unit that you attacked is no longer engaged in combat and cannot be chosen to fight. So you get to go in there, smash some things. So say you made up a smash captain with a jump pack and a thunder hammer that you wanted to just run in there and jump in and start smacking heavy armor. You give him that Warlord trait. Suddenly he jumps in there, punches that knight for whatever he can on with his Thunderhammer, and then he just skedaddles away from it, so that knight can't attack him. He's going to have to then take the time to charge into him, which is kind of interesting. So if you have a jump back on him, you have a unit that gets up close there, you can use them as a screen that he can fall back behind, so they can't even shoot him during their shooting phase or have to try to shoot through him. And it becomes a lot more of an interesting mechanic that you can use there. In addition, you could also use that to skip into another group. So say you shoot into that knight, whack the knight with your Thunderhammer, and then you use that 6-inch consolidate to jump over into an infantry squad that's next to him but not in there. Those infantry are going to have a harder, like the loyal 32 that's gone along with those knights are going to have a hard time taking down your smash character there, and then you're protected from shooting in the next turn too. They could fall back out of combat, but then that's what it requires them to do. And you have a little bit more control with what you can do during the assault phase, which is kind of interesting. So, I think these guys are going to really shine during the shooting, but that's an interesting little mechanic that you can have to provide a little pressure in the backfield that you would not normally otherwise be able to. Then you have Merciless Logic, resolving an attack made by this Warlord, an unmodified hit roll of 6. You can make one additional attack against the same unit using the same weapon, and they don't explode. So it basically makes 6s explode for your character, which is pretty cool. And then target protocols. The start of your shooting phase, select one friendly Iron Hands unit within 6 inches of Warlord. Once that phase, when resolving an attack made with a ranged weapon by a model from that unit, you can reroll the hit. You can reroll the hit roll. Once that phase, you can so basically it's allowing you to reroll 1 hit, 1 wound, and 1 damage roll for that specific unit during the shooting phase, once per, which is pretty cool. Now we go into the relics here for them. These are specific ones, so you still have access to the ones, again, from the Codex Space Marines, but now you have the additional access to these. The relics of Medusa are only available to Iron Hands specifically. So if you're running them as a successor chapter, specifically a successor chapter, then you only get access to the special issue wargear. But if you are Iron Hands, you can run them as relics of Medusa. So again, it doesn't matter the paint job, it just depends upon specifically what you're running them as. If you want to run them as a successor chapter, so basically if you wanted to have the choice between the two options for your chapter tactics, and you didn't want to necessarily use the ones for the Iron Hands specifically, then you could use those ones. Or if you're just playing very fluffy and you specifically want to do the Sons of Medusa as opposed to Iron Hands, you can run and just get access to the special issue wargear or the Relics of Medusa. And if you're running Iron Hands, you have access to both, which is kind of interesting. So, going to the relics, you've got the Axe of Medusa, which replaces a power axe and replaces it and becomes strength +3, AP -3, 3 damage. So it's a brute at that point. Pretty awesome going in there. Almost as good as a power fist at that point for the cost of a power axe, which is cool. Then you've got the Aegis Ferrum, which is Primaris model only. Add 1 to the toughness characteristic of a model with this relic. When resolving an attack made against that model, reduce any damage inflicted by 1 to a minimum of 1. So it's almost got like at that point you're almost like a you give this Aegis Ferrum along with that 5-up Feel No Pain, and suddenly you've got an Aberrant as your Warlord there, who is reducing damage by 1, and then you get a Feel No Pain on top of it, and their toughness is increased. So you're looking at regular Primaris are now at T5, and if you've got Gravis armor on them, now they're T6. It's pretty awesome. I think that's a pretty cool thing they've got there. Then you've got the Mind Forge, model equipped with a Force Sword, Force Axe, or Force Stave only. So essentially it just replaces any force weapon, so your librarians that you've got going on there. This becomes strength ×2, AP -3, D3 damage. So it's still the D3 from a force weapon, but it's at AP -3 like a power sword, and it's strength ×2 like a power fist, which is super cool. So it's basically a force power fist is what they've got going on there, which is awesome. Then you've got Betrayer's Bane, model equipped with a Combi Melta only. The relic replaces a Combi Melta, and it becomes, you get to choose between whether you want to use the Bolt Gun or the Melt Gun. The Bolt Gun is Rapid Fire 1, Strength 4, AP nothing, 1 damage, so it's a regular Bolt Gun. The Melt Gun is Assault 2, Strength 8, AP -4, D6 damage. And when resolving attack made with this weapon's Melta-Gun profile against a target, it's within half range, you get the usual stuff. So it basically just makes their the Melta portion of the Combi Melta into Assault 2 as opposed to just the Assault 1. So pretty good. Then you've got the Ironstone. When resolving an attack made against an Iron Hands vehicle unit within 3 inches of a friendly model with this relic, reduce any damage inflicted by one. So essentially, this person is here buffing a bunch of vehicles. So if you put him in the middle of a bunch of dreadnoughts, or you put him inside, at a parking lot or something like that, any of those Iron Hands vehicles units within 3 inches of that friendly model reduce damage done to them by 1 to a minimum of 1. So that's pretty helpful in keeping your vehicles alive, especially since their chapter tactic allows those vehicles to count their wounds for their profile times 2. So you're looking at the amount of wounds that you have to take down before they start getting bracketed is huge at that point, especially if the amount of damage you're doing to them is being reduced by 1. So suddenly that supercharged plasma gun is still only doing 1 damage. Then you've got the Tempered Helm. Whilst a model from your army with this relic on the battlefield, you can roll d6 for each command point. So essentially it's a 5+, get your command point back. But at the same time, it says here you can only have 1 command point refunded per battle round by this relic. So this now makes it, even if you're using this in open play or in narrative play, you can only get 1 per battle round back with this relic. So it basically takes the new match play rules about returning CP and extends it into all forms of play. So you're not getting back multiple times per round. And then the Gorgon's Chain, I remember that in 7th edition. But this one says, a model of this relic has a 4+ invul save. When resolving an attack made with a ranged weapon against that model, subtract 1 from the wound roll. So basically, subtracting 1 from the wound rolls against them, which is pretty good, especially if you can, like back in the day, you just got someone there. Maybe you've got someone with Gravis armor there is T5, and most of the bolter weapons then are wounding you on 5, and then you have to reduce the number by 1, so essentially they're only wounding you on 6s. It's not bad. That's pretty cool. I could take that one. Going to special issue wargear, we've got the adamantine mantle. It basically gives them the 5+ feel no pain as opposed to the 6+ feel no pain. Artificer armor as a save characteristic of 5+ and of 2+ and a 5+ invul save. So basically giving them Terminator armor there. Mastercrafted weapon. When you give this weapon, this relic, select 1 weapon the model is equipped with. Cannot be a weapon whose profile includes the word mastercrafted. Add 1 to the damage characteristic of that weapon. The weapon is considered to be a chapter relic. Then you got digital weapons. When a model with this relic fights, it can make 1 additional attack using the close combat weapon profile. When resolving attacks, if a hit is scored, the target suffers 1 mortal wound and the attack sequence ends. So essentially, it's basically if you can hit with a regular weapon, you're giving a mortal wound into it, which is pretty cool. It's just like an additional thing. So it's sort of like the chain sword, how you get that 1 extra attack. This is the same thing. Or like a cultist knife, same thing. You just get 1 extra attack with the digital weapons. You can, if you get a hit, you cause a mortal wound, which is pretty cool. You've got the Auto Medicae Bionic. If a model with this relic has lost any wounds at the start of your turn, it regains up to D3 lost wounds, which is pretty cool. Which is pretty cool, just receiving D3 wounds back each turn, which is going to make it even harder to get you down, even though you've got those feel no pains and whatever else stacked up on top there. Then you got the Teeth of Mars, which is an upgrade to the chainsword, makes it AP -2 and 2 damage, which is pretty cool. And if you're attacking against a vehicle, it becomes strength ×2. So you got AP -2, 2 damage, strength ×2 against vehicles. Pretty good. Makes it so that you're not as afraid to get into combat with vehicles as you would normally when you just have a chainsword. Then you've got Haywire Bolts. Essentially what this does is you give this model this relic, select 1 bolt weapon that model is equipped with. When the bearer shoots this weapon, they can choose for it to fire a Haywire Bolt. If you do, you can only make 1 attack with that weapon, but when resolving attacks it is made against a vehicle unit, an unmodified wound roll of a 4 through 5 inflicts D3 mortal wounds on the target in addition to any damage, and an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts 3 mortal wounds in addition to any damage. So the bolter weapon is still going to be able to do all its bolty goodness, but in addition, you're putting on like haywire stuff where you're doing D3 mortal wounds on a 4 through 5, and on a 6 you're doing 3 mortal wounds, which is pretty cool. And then you got the Fortis Pattern Data Spike, which is a Tech Marine only. When a model with this relic uses their Blessed Omnissiah roll 2 dice when determining how many lost wounds are regained and discard one of the results. So it's basically like the melter roll, where you get to roll 2d3 or 2d3, and take the highest one that you want there. Going into some of their stratagems here, they've got some really cool ones that I think are going to really make these guys shine, which is awesome. You've got Mercy's weakness. Use the stratagem in shooting phase or the fight phase when an Iron Hands unit from your army is chosen to shoot with or fight with. Select one enemy unit until the end of that phase. Every attack made with the model in that Iron Hand unit from the army that can target the selected unit must do so. So you can't split attacks between two different units. You have to attack one specific unit that got nominated, but each unmodified wound roll of a 6 counts as twice. Counts as 2 instead of 1, which is pretty cool. That's 1 CP. You've got methodical firepower. Use at the start of your movement phase. If you're in the Devastator Doctrine, if the Devastator Doctrine is not in effect, essentially it gives them the ability to, that one unit for 1 CP, to count as if they're in the Devastator Doctrine, which is beneficial because you can also then, if you decide to move on because you've got a whole bunch of bolt weapons and you want some of those, that bolty goodness coming from from the tactical doctrines, you can spend that 1 CP so that those Dubros there can shoot their las cannons or whatever and still gain the benefit of all the other things, including the special portion of the doctrine for the Iron Hands specifically. For 1 CP, you can make a dreadnought, a character, and add 1 to attacks and leadership characteristic for that model, which is pretty cool. Essentially, it's sort of like the same thing, like with the knights, where they can make another knight into a character. You can make a knight, basically a dreadnought into a character, which is pretty cool. And they're going to have less than 10 wounds. If you got a regular dreadnought, less than 10 wounds can't be targeted. So if you want to sit back, a dreadnought with las cannons sitting in the back just shooting away, and you don't want him taken out because that's your main source of stuff there. You spend the 1 CP, now they're a character, they can't attack them unless they're the closest. And if they're in your back line, they're going to have a hard time getting to you, which is pretty cool. Then you've got Vengeance for Istvan, 1 CP. Basically helps against Word Bearers, Iron Warriors, Night Lords, and Alpha Legion. You can reroll hit rolls against them, which is pretty cool. It's in the fight phase. Then you have Wrathful Machine Spirit for 2 CP. Use a stratagem in the shooting phase or the fight phase when an Iron Hand vehicle model from your army is chosen to shoot with or fight with until the end of the phase. When resolving an attack made by that model, you can reroll the hit rolls. And it's reroll the hit rolls, not miss. So again, it helps you get past any modifiers that you might be shooting. So if you're have your las cannon, you're shooting against an Alatok flyer that's across the board, and they spend that the CP for the lightning fast reflexes, and you're at -3 to hit. You can still reroll those 3s and 4s and 5s to try to get to that 6 that you need to get those las cannon shots in, which is pretty cool. Then you've got 1 CP, Souls of Iron. Use this stratagem in your opponent's psychic phase when an enemy psyker model manifests a psychic power within 24 inches of an Iron Hands unit from your army after any Deny the Witch attempt. So, and roll 1d6 on a 4+, the psychic power is resisted. So essentially what it does is it allows you to try to deny the witch first off, and if that fails, then you can spend the 1 CP to roll 1d6 on a 4+. It'll ignore that psychic power. So if there's one that's coming up here and it's just going to make a big difference, like it's say you're going against Gene Stealer Cult and they are trying to ignore Overwatch, which you're on 5s and 6s at this point because of being Iron Hands. They cast it onto you. They cast Mass Hypnosis, and it suddenly means you can't Overwatch. You try to deny it, fail to deny the witch test. You spend the 1 CP on a 4+. You get a 50-50 chance of that not being it being resisted, which is pretty cool. Then you've got the Scion of the Forge. Use the stratagem before the battle. Select one Iron Hands model from your army that has the word Sergeant in their profile. That model can have one of the following special issue wargear relics. So basically, this allows you to give like we were talking about the special issue wargear. It allows you to give a sergeant from one of your forces one of those relics. So if you want to give a sergeant from a tactical squad the Teeth of Mars, so he's got the buffed up chainsword when he gets up in front into the combat there. That's pretty cool to allow them to do that. They still have to be different, so you can't give every single sergeant the Teeth of Mars, but just having the one there for 1 CP, it might be worth it, especially if you're going to run them up there and you want them to act as either to clear screens or want them to be a road bump for another unit. Just the ability to have that sergeant get up in there with those extra attacks and make a bit of a mess is pretty cool. Then you've got Reject the Flesh, Embrace the Machine. Use the stratagem in any phase when an Iron Hands infantry unit from your army is chosen as the target for an attack. Until the end of the phase, when a model in that unit would lose a wound, roll a d6, adding 1 to the result for that model if that model has the all flesh is weakness warlord trait and a 5+, that wound is not lost. So essentially, it gives you the ability to give the 5+ feel no pain to every unit that you have in there, one at a time. But it will make it, if you gave your warlord that warlord trait that allows them to have the 5+, they'll now have a 4+ feel no pain. So say you get into close combat again with the guy, he gets up in there, and you now give him a 4+ feel no pain against all those attacks that are coming back at him. Pretty good. Then you have Engine Purge. Use this stratagem at the start of your movement phase if the Devastator Doctrine is active. Until the start of the next battle round, when resolving an attack made with a heavy or grenade weapon by an Iron Hands model from your army, on an unmodified wound roll of 6, add an additional 1 to the armor penetration characteristic of the weapon for that attack. You can only use the stratagem once per battle. So that's pretty cool. So you basically use it at the start of your movement phase if the Devastator Doctrine is active until the start of your next battle round. So essentially you have the whole round there while the Devastator Doctrine is going. You've got extra AP -2 to your weapons, which is pretty cool. Then you got the Gorgon's Rage. Use this stratagem and the fight phase when an Iron Hands unit from your army is chosen to fight with. Till the end of of that phase, when resolving an attack made with a melee weapon by a model in that unit, add 1 to the hit roll. In addition, until the end of the phase, when resolving an attack made with a melee weapon by a model in that unit against an Emperor's Children unit, add 1 to the wound roll. So you get to add 1 to the hit rolls and 1 to the wound rolls, but the wound roll is specifically Emperor's Children. Then you've got 1 CP for Cogitated Martyrdom. Use the stratagem at the start of the shooting phase. Select an Iron Hands infantry unit from your army. Till the end of the phase, when a friendly Iron Hands character model within 3 inches of that unit would lose a wound. Basically, it can turn any unit into drones. It'll allow them to on a 2+, put a mortal wound onto the squad, as opposed to only 1 attempt can be made to intercept each attack. So basically, you have a 2+, you get to make them into drones, into the Tau drones. So you can have a squad of scouts back there next to your characters to do that. If you're running into someone with a whole bunch of snipers or anything like that, they can have that ability to then just like fluff off wounds. So sort of like the characters from Genestealer Cult, which is pretty cool. Except this one is 1 mortal wound, so even if you get shot with a las cannon, I guess it's the similar thing. Except it's instead of model slain. So if you put it onto a Primaris unit, they can take 2 different shots into the face, which is pretty cool. You got Machine Empathy. Use the stratagem in your movement phase after an Iron Hands Tech Marine model from your army has used their Blessing of the Omnissiah ability. The model can use that ability again and can repair a model that has already been repaired that turn. So you could basically put, so if you spent that 1 CP onto the Forge Father model that they have there, he could heal a unit 6 wounds in 1 turn for 1 CP, which is pretty incredible, pretty amazing. It really helps you buff back up those vehicles, and again, looking back on it, you've got the ability that their tiers that they've got going on there are doubled the wounds for that. So it's going to be very hard to make Iron Hands vehicles non-usable, which is interesting. You've got Paragon of Iron for 1 CP. Use the stratagem before the battle after nominating an Iron Hands character model that is not a named character to be your Warlord. You can generate 1 additional Warlord trait for them. This must be from the Iron Hands Warlord Traits table. All of the Warlord trait your army includes must be different. So basically allows you to give your non-named character 2 Warlord traits, which is pretty incredible. So you can give them, the 5+ invul save, as well as the ability to consolidate 6 inches and not towards the closest enemy model, which is pretty awesome. So that's pretty cool, being able to do that. Then you've got Optimal Repulsion Doctrines. Use the stratagem in your opponent's charge phase when an Iron Hands unit from your army fires Overwatch. Until the end of the phase, when resolving an Overwatch attack made by a model in that unit, hit rolls of 5 or 6 scores a hit. If that unit has the Flesh is Weak chapter tactic, so essentially if you are Iron Hands specifically and not one of the successor chapters, when resolving an Overwatch attack made by a model that unit, hit roll of 4 through 6 scores a hit. So for 1 CP, you can now Overwatch on 4, 5, or 6. So suddenly you've got like a squad of aggressors that someone's trying to charge with a whole bunch of bloodletters for 1 CP. Now half of those shots are going to be hitting them as opposed to 1 in 6 of those shots hitting them, which is pretty incredible. I think that's pretty awesome there that they've got that ability to just like fire in there. It's going to be pretty awesome. I'm going to make it very difficult to get off charges into them, which is not great for people like Gene Stealer Cult or demons or stuff like that, but this might be a response to that, which is pretty interesting. Then you've got the mnemonic auto savant. Use the stratagem at the end of your turn after achieving a tactical objective. If an Iron Hands warlord from your army is on the battlefield, do not discard that tactical objective at the start of the next turn. Do not discard that tactical objective at the start of the next turn. It is once again active. You can only use the stratagem if the mission using tactical objectives. So essentially, you go through here, you score Slay the Warlord for 2 CP. You can now get Slay the Warlord again on the next turn, which is pretty awesome, giving you the ability to get D3 points again, which is pretty awesome. And situational for sure, obviously, and you obviously have to be playing, Maelstrom of War as opposed to anything else. But still, pretty cool that they have that, and that they have stratagems that are specific to different types of play as opposed to just, match open play or anything like that. That they've got the ability that they can go have this stratagem that is specifically for a type of battle, which is cool. And then you've got Bequeathed by the Iron Council. Essentially what this will allow you to do is, if you are running a successor chapter and because you don't have access to the Relics of Medusa as a successor chapter, for 1 CP you can now take one of those relics of the successor as a successor chapter. So it allows you to again keep using the Sons of Medusa, have the different kind of chapter tactics that you want, but still get access to the Warlord traits, which is pretty cool. And then they've got Technomancy as their discipline for psychic powers. So we've got Blessings of the Machine God. It's a warp charge value of 5. If manifests as like one friendly Iron Hand vehicle model within 12 inches of the Psyker, but it has to be a warp charge successful. The test has to be an 8 or more for you to target a Titanic model. Until the start of your next psychic phase, when resolving an attack made by that model, add 1 to the hit rolls. So that's pretty cool. So suddenly now your tanks are getting +1 to hit. So, with the Forge Father, you give, say, 1 Predator the ability to hit on 2s. With this psychic power, you can give another Predator the ability to have 2+ on its ballistic skill. Pretty awesome stuff that you have there, the way that you can combine that. You got Abjuration Mechanicum. It is a warp charge value of 7. If manifests, select one enemy unit within 18 inches of and visible to the Psyker. Until the start of your next psychic phase, when resolving an attack made with a ranged weapon by a model in that unit, an unmodified hit roll of 1, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound after resolving that attack. Essentially makes all their weapons get hot, regardless of whether they supercharge or not. And it's an unmodified hit roll of 1. So if they're -3 to hit, they're not going to be doing it, but at the same time, if they're +1 to hit, they're going to be doing it on 1 anyway. So essentially, they've got the kill team rule for gets hot on all of their weapons, which is pretty cool. So you pop that down onto like an aggressor squad, and suddenly all those dice that they're rolling are popping them and putting mortal wounds onto them. It could be pretty brutal, and it'll make them think about whether or not they want to shoot. So suddenly now they're not shooting that aggressor squad for an entire turn, even in Overwatch or anything like that, and it becomes a big choice that they have to make at that point, because otherwise they could easily kill themselves with the amount of dice that they're rolling at that point. You got Fury of Medusa, warp charge value of 6. If manifested, select one enemy model within 18 inches of and visible to the Psyker. Draw the shortest possible imaginary straight line 1 millimeter wide between this Psyker's base and that model's base. Roll 1d6 for the selected model's unit. Roll 1d6 for the selected model's unit and each other enemy unit that line passes across, adding 2 to the result. If the unit being rolled for is a vehicle. On a 4 through 5, the unit being rolled for suffers 1 mortal wound, and on a 6+, the unit being rolled for suffers D3 mortal wounds. So putting mortal wounds is basically just a laser bolt that goes shooting through everything, which is pretty cool. Then you got Psi Steel Armor, warp charge value of 6. If manifests like one friendly Iron Hands unit within 12 inches of the Psyker. Until the start of your next Psychic phase, when resolving an attack made against that unit, add 1 to the saving throw. Invulnerable saves are not affected. So it's only a saving throw, so no invul saves, just armor saves, essentially, that you've got going on there. Which is pretty cool. I still think it's going to be super effective, which is fun. And you've got Reforge. Reforge is a warp charge value of 5. If manifests like one friendly Iron Hands vehicle model within 3 inches of and visible to this Psyker, that model regains up to D3 lost wounds. So they've got a lot of ways of really bringing back wounds, which is pretty cool. So I think you're going to see a lot of, Forge Father, a lot of Tech Marines, a lot of people using these abilities to bring back wounds on these vehicles. And the Iron Hand vehicles are just going to be around forever unless you can really take them out. So maybe suddenly shooting that Rhino with a volcano cannon makes a bit more sense. And then you got Machine Flints. Warp charge value of 6. It manifests like one enemy vehicle unit that is within 18 inches of and visible to the Psyker. That unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. You can then select one other enemy unit that was within 6 inches of and visible to that vehicle unit when the power is manifested. Roll 1d6 for each mortal wound that vehicle unit suffered. For each 3+, the other selected unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So essentially, you do D3 mortal wounds to a vehicle. Then you get to choose another enemy. You can then select one other enemy unit that was within 6 inches of and visible to the vehicle. So it doesn't have to be the second one. Doesn't have to be a vehicle. So say there's like a character sitting next to a tank, or there is a bunch of snipers sitting next to a tank. You shoot the tank with this ability. Do D3 mortal wounds for each of the mortal wounds that you do. So if you did 3 mortal wounds, you roll a D6, and on a 3+ for each of those, you do a mortal wound to that new unit that you choose. So it's pretty cool. Really like the abilities that they've got to go there, which is pretty awesome. They also have tactical objectives going through them there. They basically are just the same thing as usual, where they switch out someone. So they've got score D3 victory points if at least one enemy unit was destroyed as a result of an attack made by an Iron Hands model from your army during both the shooting phase and the fight phase of this turn. So that's kind of interesting. It makes you want to shoot and charge, which is pretty cool. A bunch of different things there, which is pretty cool. But these guys are going to be super fun. I think they're going to be really cool. I think they've got a lot of ability to just be super durable, and just you're going to have a hard time taking them down. They've basically become like the Death Guard of the Loyalist chapters here, with their abilities to handle all of that, and their abilities to just to stick around. So there's psychic powers, warlord traits, stratagems, all of these different things that are designed to help you put wounds back onto vehicles, and those vehicles are not getting degraded until they get double the wound value towards the tiers that they're in. So they're not going to be degraded as fast. They're not going away, and it's going to be tough to slog your way through it and take them all down. But I think that's kind of fun. I think it's kind of interesting and a new way to see it. Super excited that Space Marines are now going to have their vehicles affected by chapter tactics and those kind of things, which is fun to see, and fun to see it expanded again with these guys here with the Iron Hands and what they have the ability to do there. But yeah, I see gun lines being super effective with these guys. I see Devastator squads are going to be super great with these guys. So you got a bunch of guys with las cannons that can now move around, not suffer the -1 penalty for moving with a heavy weapon, get into position, launch off their stuff, and now those las cannons are AP -4. So unless you got 2+ armor, they're going straight through your armor and doing the D6 damage, which is pretty awesome, from 48 inches away as opposed to 12 inches for a meltagun. I think it's going to be some fun things that you can have there. I think Tech Marines are going to be super popular. I think you're going to see a lot of Dreadnoughts that are going to be super popular with this. And I think the combination of Dreadnoughts being able to... Because now Dreadnoughts can move with their las cannons and not suffer the -1. So now, they've got them just chugging along up the field, shooting away with their las cannons until they get close enough, and then they can go and punch something in the face with their power fist, which is pretty awesome. So I think it's going to be cool to see how that all plays out and how they end up becoming. I think they're going to become pretty popular, especially with Space Marine gun lines being as popular as they are. I think these guys are going to be a very good choice for Space Marine gun lines to use because of all the abilities that they have, and the ability to just be super durable and stick around to the end game with all of their abilities, because the 3+ armor will only take you so far, but 3+ armor plus the ability to ignore wounds plus the ability to regain wounds means that you're probably going to be sticking around for a heck of a long time that they're going to have to try to get through you. So, yes, the Iron Hands. Flesh is weak, but this codex is not. I think this supplement, you're going to see a lot of it out there, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be super fun. It'll be super fun to see how it all plays out. And the thing that I'm really enjoying about all of these is that they're really giving you the ability to play Marines in different ways. So they're not everything is not just different colored Ultramarines. You've got specific ways of playing the Iron Hands that's going to be different than you're going to play the White Scars, or different than you're going to play the Raven Guard, or different than you're going to play the Ultramarines. You've got different ways of playing it, and each of these different Codex supplements give you the ability to run them in different ways and play them differently, so that you've got your one Marine army that you now have a bunch of different options on how you want to play them. Go out there and try it and see what fits with your gameplay better, see what fits with what you want to see on the table better. And just have fun with it, which I think is super cool. And it's fun to see that kind of diversity within Marines across the different chapters, because that's the way it's been, is that the different chapters were meant to be different. That's why you have the different chapters like the Space Wolves or the Blood Angels or the Dark Angels. Those were not meant to be the only chapters that were slightly different. Every chapter had its own quirks, had its own ways of doing it, but they've just kind of had all of the Codex adherent chapters together in the one codex for a long time here, and these new supplements are going to allow you to run them still being Codex adherent. That's why they've got them in the main Space Marines codex, but with the addition of being able to run them in their own unique and very flavorful way, which I think is fun. So yeah, that's my take on Iron Hands here. I think they've got a lot of stuff that they've got going for them, and they're going to be a super strong force that you're going to see out there doing really good things for Marines everywhere. So I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek, as always. And until next time, have fun.